Musico for being my chairman and dealing with the 3 different schedule changes I've had to go through this year. Mr. Nadiger for meeting with me every week, 6:30 a.m., even if eventually we forgot what day it was on, and Ms. Sukup and I interrupted each other. And Mr. Power for reading my thesis and looking at my beautiful paintings that I like quite a lot. So, and thank you to everyone for coming to my defense. At the start of this process, end of last year, we were writing my junior thesis. And I decided to be a bit weird with my junior thesis, and I wrote on Ozymandias, because I didn't want to go back and reread an entire school book and have to do my school reading. And that kind of oriented me into what I wanted to do for my actual senior thesis, which was not that much reading, but things that I do enjoy looking at. So we decided to go with some of my favorite books that we read at school, which was the Edgar Allan Poe Complete Stories. We went through many different things. We were debating doing poems, anything, and we realized we didn't actually have a curricular text. So we decided to just do all 5 of the 7th grade stories, that being Cask of Amontillado, Telltale Heart, Pit and the Pendulum, The Fall of the House of Usher, and I can never remember the 5th one, and this one, that I will circle back to later. Then we decided, what do I want to do for my other one? And I knew I was going with Mr. Nider on the Europe trip, so we decided, let's do some paintings that we'll see in Arles of Van Gogh. And we did not decide what paintings we'd do until we came back to school for senior year, because we didn't know what paintings we'd see. Much to our surprise, the book we got on the paintings did not contain any of the actual paintings we saw in Arles or any of the locations, other than the Ali Campus, the entrance to public gardens, and the Colosseum. So the self-portraits were added on after the fact because we didn't have any access to the other ones. And they actually were probably some of my favorite paintings to analyze. And then we decided what to do for philosophy. And Mr. Matter pulled up a list of, here's all my books that I've always wanted to do. And he said, on Art and Life by John Ruskin, it's about Gothic architecture. And I said, that sounds cool, let's do that. And I ended up reading this at a camp up in Flagstaff, Pine Top, with a bunch of kids chasing me around. So not the best first reading of it, but as I read more into it, I realized this is probably the philosophy text that I've read that I've agreed with the most. It has matched my personal philosophy the most. So from there, we came to, what do all these have in common? And they all have in common a love of change, a love of what is different. And from there we went, the love of change is important, it is crucial for a good life. And before we get into this, to help embody the love of change, I have a little something planned, including a costume change into probably my favorite painting I saw while in Arles, which was the Arles Starry Night. So I figured, if we're doing love of change, might as well incorporate into the fence as well. My thesis is, love of change is important for a good life. Repeat that, the love of change is important for a good life.
Okay. So, the love of change is important for a good life. What makes a life good? Don't say change.
No. What makes a life good is when it's lived true to oneself. If that means you have to be your own person, your own individual, meaning everything that you do should not, it can follow the guidelines laid out by others, but you should be the one making the decisions. It should be done according to what you want to do, what you think is good.
Right. So, why is a love of change so necessary to living a life true to oneself?
John Ruskin says, find what page I put this on, but I know I referenced it. John Ruskin says that imperfection is crucial, it is a crucial part to being human. If you don't have imperfection, you are not, it's on page 4, that imperfection is in some sort essential to life. So if life is imperfect, you have to love that change, love that imperfection in life, or else you're not truly loving life and therefore not living a good life.
So, you're saying Ruskin's love of change is embracing imperfection. 9?
Yes.
How does that play out in any of your texts where this love of change is synonymous with embracing imperfection?
Well, we see, not really with the text, but with the paintings, we see within the two different self-portraits, we see specifically self-portrait with the bandage ear and pipe, Van Gogh embraced the imperfection that he himself has within him, where he's chopped off his ear, he's kind of gone more into himself, but he still shows that love of change. He still accepts it and embraces it as who he is, even if he himself is not a perfect person.
Two different routes to take here. How do we know Van Gogh has a good life?
We don't, and I don't think Van Gogh fully lives a good life. I think we see him engage in that diseased love of change when he cuts his ear off, because then he's doing change for the sake of it. But we see him with, like for example, Les Alicantes, where he's gone to this place 3 times. He's made this painting 3 different times, 3 different ways. Each time, something different, focusing on something different about the area. So we see him embrace this change. Not everything's going to always remain the same. So we know he has that, he makes effort to live that good life, even if towards the end of his life it starts to dwindle and he starts to embrace the disease level change.
Okay, this gets into one of the questions I really have. How do we, one of the foundational questions I have, how do we know that it's a disease level change?
Instead of being the right love?
Right, yeah.
Well, the main part of it is in the disease love, you're no longer embracing change, you're forcing change. It's no longer, this has changed around me, it's I'm going to make change. I talked about it in the Mask of the Red Death and the Fall of the House of Usher.
Which, by the way, Mask of the Red Death is the one you didn't mention.
Is that the one?
Yes.
Thank you. Mask of the Red Death, where Prince Prospero is going and trying to make this big change in his life, trying to throw this big lavish party, not because something good could come of it, but because he's bored and wants change in his life, and he's forcing it to happen.
All right, because it seems to me that a number of your examples were not simply about forcing change, but that you were identifying a disease level of change by the outcome.
Outcome would be what comes of it, but we see with,
Which would be death. So all of
Not
or
all
or
of them.
destruction or
we don't see that happen in Castle of Amontillado. When the murderer murders Fortunato, all he has is, he has a bit of a worry, he starts to realize what he's doing isn't good, it isn't perfect, but he doesn't suffer any long-lasting massive consequences from that. He gets away scot-free at the end, and Fortunato's never found.
okay, but it's not great for Fortunato.
No.
So it seems like, at least in all of the disease love of change, the forcing change, that someone is destroyed on account of it. But you're saying in the Castle of Amontillado that it's not the person who's embracing the disease love of change who suffers the consequences.
It's not suffer the consequences of his actions, he suffers the consequences of his mindset. Because he tries to aim for that perfection. If he starts to worry when he's burying Fortunato, he starts to freak out, and then he starts to suffer from realizing, oh, perfection isn't achievable. I can't achieve this perfection I thought I could.
Tell me more about that. In what way does he show that he is tortured by this idea of not being able to achieve perfection?
We see when he's burying him, he's been calm and collected the entire way through. He's been luring Fortunato to his demise. But once he's put Fortunato in his kind of tomb, then he starts to grow impatient, his heart grows sick. He starts to physically and internally start to worry about what is happening.
What does he say that shows that he's worried about what is happening as opposed to, I don't know, maybe growing sick because he's at the end of this adventure, or for some other reason.
It's interesting. 887, he says, my heart grew sick, dash, on account of the dampness of the catchments.
We also know that this is told from his perspective. It's him telling this story. And I saw that as, with the dash being there, him trying to make up a reason, similar to what we see with the Telltale Heart, where we see him kill the man, and as he's retelling it, he's like, I don't know why I did it, I don't know why I did it, oh, it must have been because of the eye. It's them trying to put a reason other than what they did is wrong to their sickness or their murders.
And I think that's a decent interpretation, right? There's certainly bias on the part of the narrator there. So how do you know what the reason is?
I do not fully know what the reason is, but I made a broad assumption that murder is a bad thing. Because murder would be forcing change. It would be ending someone's life and not waiting for their life to end itself. That would be an example of the disease love of change. And if that's what they're practicing, and that's when it comes about, is specifically when he drops the torch in there and puts the last brick, fully ending Fortunato, that's when he starts to grow sick. That's when he's fully actually done the act of embracing the disease love of change.
So I want to circle back around to this idea of perfection, and then I should pass it over for sure. So in your description of this right love or correct love of change, you started to sound almost Aristotelian in the description of that love of change. It sounded like the love of change was hitting some sort of Aristotelian mean between two extremes, right? Almost like the character virtues. Would you say, which is interesting, because I know a number of students would argue that Aristotle is demanding perfection in what he says of the virtues. Would you say the same thing?
That Aristotle's demanding perfection? Last time I read Aristotle was junior year. It's not fresh on my mind.
So when you're talking about this demanding perfection, what does it look like then if it's not an idea of hitting some perfect virtue? What kind of perfection are you talking about?
I do think it'd be aiming for perfect virtue, but it'd be aiming for it in such a way that you can't make any errors anymore.
Hence perfection.
Hence perfection, and you shouldn't aim for that, because if you were to ever reach that stage, you would lose out on the being a human. You'd lose out on having a life.
Could you hit that stage? As a
I
human being?
I do not think you could hit that stage, but the closer you get to it, and the more you work up to that stage, the less of a life you will live.
So how does one, okay, so when Aristotle describes this hitting the mean between two extremes for a virtue, he talks about if you are a bit on the cowardly side, aiming a little bit more towards the reckless side, so that when you fall short, which you will, you'll come closer to courage. But the idea is to come closer to courage. Not that you are ever maybe going to hit it perfectly, and certainly not hit it by aiming at it, but the goal still is courage. So if the goal is this mean between two extremes, how does that differ from a kind of aiming at perfection?
Main way I've set that up is to aim at perfection is to believe it's achievable, or to try and get super close to that. But Ruskin says, page 13 of Ruskin, page 14 of my thesis, in all things that people see or do, people are to desire perfection. You should hold this idea of perfection there, because it's something that's been set up by the people that came before you. And we know you should not get rid of all that because that would be to force change. That wouldn't be right. But you need to accept the fact that you're never going to hit that. You need to accept the fact that that's not possible. So even if you want perfection, you need to also be able to accept that that's never going to happen. So you can't aim for it. You can aim close to it. You want to make it good, but you don't want to make it perfect.
Isn't that sort of forcing something in a weird way? I mean, if you have a goal and you know you're not going to achieve it, so you aim at something else because
You still want to try your best at it. You don't want to just, oh, I'm not going to reach perfection, I might as well not try at all.
okay.
You should still try to do as good as you can on it, even if that's never going to be perfect.
So it sounds like, on the whole, embracing change is just fairly synonymous with embracing imperfection and failure. Yeah, okay, all right.
Great, thanks. I want to start here, follow up on this, you just referenced page 13, because page 14 of your paper, 13 of Ruskin, and stay in the realm of art and architecture for just a second, and then shift to the analogy that's behind much of your paper, from art to life, which is, I guess, the title, on art and life. So you're moving from art to life. But here on 13, what you just referenced, we're aiming for perfection, but not because we just want to lower the bar so we can more easily attain it. What's the problem? What is the genuine problem of demanding perfection?
Well, if you demand perfection, you are ignoring the human aspect of what you're doing. If you're demanding perfection, you can't, that's not possible. Ruskin says that, page 14, 10 to 1, he makes a mistake in the first touch he gives to his work. This is page 15, page 14 of Ruskin. If you're demanding that perfection, you're ignoring the fact that it's a human doing it. It's a human behind that action.
And then on page 14 of 15 of your paper, 14 of Ruskin, it's funny how close those are. 15 of your paper, 14 of Ruskin, you reference the quotation that's on the front of the book. If it's on the front of the book, it must be important. Tell us about it.
You must either make a tool of the creature or a man of him. You cannot make both. And to make a tool is to do, as you said, is to demand perfection, because that's what you expect from a tool. You don't expect a tool to be something that 10 to 1 makes a mistake when you use it, or else it'd be a bad tool. So you need to accept that you're not going to make all that. You're not going to make all these perfect actions. You're going to make mistakes. That's how you must make a man of them.
Right, with that in our minds, what's Ruskin's overall orientation to Gothic? Good or bad form of architecture?
Great. He thinks it's the greatest form of architecture.
Okay,
Because
so
it's the ones that expresses human emotions the most.
what sort of architecture makes a tool of the man?
The Greek and Egyptian architectures, where he uses the example of a Corinthian column. If we make this Corinthian column, we're demanding that all the leaves on the column look great, because we want every leaf on every column to look the same. And that's demanding a very high form of perfection from each of the workers. In Egypt, it's the same. We want all these bricks to be the same. It's a lower form of perfection. It's possibly more, you can get closer to that. It's easier to make roughly the same size bricks than it is perfect leaves on a column. You're still demanding that these people don't make any mistake when they make that brick. This is for the pyramids, the giant bricks for the pyramids.
So pyramids, Corinthian capitals, are the workmen doing that work men or tools, slaves? How would we describe them?
They are tools. They've been made tools by the people demanding that perfection of them. So whoever told them to make that column have made these men tools.
And the person doing it, does he have to use his mind?
The workman or the person putting them to
The
work?
workman.
He would have to use his mind, but it's not his mind. It's the mind of the person that put them to that. He's using their idea, not his own.
But in Gothic architecture, the workman is using his mind for the design?
Yes.
Why?
In Gothic architecture, there's all the greebling. is the main thing he uses. It's all these little details that the worker can add, or that is expressive of the person who designed it. But the person who designed it did not design it to be perfect, he designed it to express something human. With the acanthus leaves on the column, it's not the person who put them to work designed it because it's his acanthus leaves. It's the person decided to do that because that's what every other column does. That's what every other Corinthian column looks like.
Ruskin didn't know that the Parthenon isn't actually perfect, did he? Seems like he didn't know that.
He doesn't write about it, I'm sure he does.
Is that a really recent discovery that the Parthenon is
Doesn't-
especially to be imperfect so that it looks perfect to the human eye?
He doesn't reference any specific
Okay.
building.
Just
This
curious.
is from a larger book called The Stones of Venice, where he's looking at the Venetian architecture.
I got asked this the other day by my family. He gives some examples. He doesn't provide them in here, but maybe in one of the other
You
essays.
just have to read the 2,000-page version, right?
That's my
Yeah.
summary.
Look at the diagrams, because Ruskin spends a lot of time drawing his own diagrams of buildings. But something like, it is interesting, but the idea would still be every column looks exactly the same. Don't think, just do. And you're saying Gothic is different. Say a little bit more about that.
Gothic architecture is done not because it's what every other person has done. It's done because it's what the architect wants and has envisioned. So while the workman still seems to be in this state of just doing what he's been told is completely new. It's not something that's been done before.
But it's still just because he's been told to do it? The workman has, this sounds like the workman's still a tool.
Yeah.
Just a new kind of tool.
Yeah.
He is, because we can't achieve that right now. But if every workman, if every person, as he says, was to do what they wanted to do in life, similar to, I believe, Socrates says this in his Republic, of have people do what they think they're best at. If every workman was to do what they wanted to do, what they enjoyed doing, that would be the perfect world where everyone is a man and no one is a tool. But because we don't live in such a perfect world, the workman will still be made into a tool. But in Gothic architecture, they're the least tool they can possibly be.
Still a tool, but less of a tool.
Less of a tool.
Are you sure that's what you want to say and Ruskin wants to say? And the fact that I'm asking tells you where I'm leaning.
I assume you're trying to disagree with that.
Well, you quote on page 5, nothing is a great work of art, for the production of which either rules or models can be given. Are there rules that tell you exactly how a Gothic cathedral should look?
Like, are there things about a Gothic cathedral that you need to have a Gothic cathedral?
For it to be Gothic, there is. But that's because as much as I love Gothic architecture, and Ruskin loves Gothic architecture, it's still not that perfection, because we can't be perfect. And it's not that ideal world, because we don't live in that ideal world. So it's still a flawed form of that art, because there's still rules given to it.
But he gives us his principles of Gothic art. And I don't think any of them could be really considered a rule. We might have been, I was expecting a little bit of reading this, his assessment of Gothic architecture. But a Corinthian column has to have exact proportions, exact dimensions. And the acanthus leaves, as you mentioned, I think it's a great example, look exactly the same way, when done well. A workman might make a mistake, but then he's a bad tool, right? But in Gothic, we don't have that. There are sometimes Corinthian elements, classical elements of a Gothic cathedral. But we don't have, what are his principles?
Says his principles on page, oh god, skipped it. Page 5. Principles are savageness, changefulness, naturalism, grotesqueness, rigidity, and redundance. It's a lot of weird words to describe architecture. But the savageness comes from just the way from where they come from, the people who started the Gothics, the Goths. That's where the savageness comes from, is they aren't perfect. The savageness is less of a savage lesser, they're not the Greeks, they're not demanding perfection. Changefulness is that you'll be able to see change in the buildings. That's what the greebling and the different types of, you'll look from one Gothic building to the next, and while they might look similar, you'll notice the statues on that one are different. It's telling a different story.
And that's probably the most important ones.
It's the most important one for my love of change. Naturalism is that it incorporates nature into it. So while it doesn't have acanthus leaves, it will have leaves on it like nature does, where the leaves are each different in their own individual leaf. It's grotesqueness, which is sort of similar to that naturalism of it will look different, it will look, or not naturalism, changefulness, where it will look different from everything else you'll see. It will look darker and stand out more compared to what the people are used to seeing. The rigidity comes from the Goths once more, and the Britain specifically is what he mentions, with they come from a place where it is so cold, everyone there is rigid. And you can see that in their architecture of it being straight lines and pointed, where they have their rigidity is reflected in their Gothic architecture. And the redundance is that they won't do anything for the sake of it, just for the sake of it being done. They won't put a window there because it looks nice. They'll put a window there because it needs a window there. They won't do anything redundant.
Wait, it says they will do redundant things. Redundance is a characteristic of Gothic.
He says it's redundant, but nothing is done for redundant reasons. Everything there is supposed to be there. While it might be an extra window, it's not like you'd see in some palaces where it's a window with nothing behind it. It's a window because the window is supposed to be there.
They just wanted a window.
But it gets used in the architecture. Not just to look nice, but because it serves a use for the building.
That sounds like redundance. It makes sense, serves a purpose.
To make it look nice serves a purpose.
You know, to make it look nice and serve a purpose. Sounds like kind of redundancy. It's at least doing two things.
Right, that was good. Of course, we had 1,000 questions about each individual element, but even where he introduces this list on page 5, he says it's the characteristic or moral elements of Gothic, which I think that is a gesture towards where we want to go next. How do these principles of architecture apply to what you're talking about? When you're talking about a good life, explain more of that analogy. Why do you think that analogy is justified? We can go from a book about architecture to thoughts about what it means to be human, what it means to be a good artist, what it means to live well, and assess characters in stories.
Go back through it, but changefulness is really the focus of what I've written on, which is you need to embrace that change in your day-to-day, in your personal life. Similar to how when you if I look at one person and another person, I'm not going to see the same person. Similar to how if I look at one Gothic building and another, I'm not going to see the same building. Savageness comes from similar, everyone is different than someone else. Something someone does might seem savage to you. It's not to them because it's how they were raised, it's how they are. Similar to how the Gothic looks savage to the Greeks and the Egyptians, but to the Goths, it is not actual savageness. It is what they have done. It serves its purpose. So, be yourself. Do as you're told. Not do as you're told. Do as you know. Do as you tell yourself. The naturalism is to embrace the change around you. The grotesqueness is to change within yourself. Because natural has to do with nature. The nature is everything that you surround yourself with. Similar to how the Gothic uses the nature of what it surrounds itself with. While the grotesqueness is specifically of the building itself, the grotesqueness 1D7 oneself is the change that goes through someone. Like the change from self-portrait to self-portrait to the bandaged type would be grotesque, and naturalism would be the three paintings. Not grotesque as in it's bad. Grotesque as in that's what it falls under.
Which is a good point.
Yes, so grotesque is a good quality. Can you define that? Because it starts to sound like grotesque and nature are overlapping, and I'm not sure what grotesque is as a good quality. Because this all sounds like it falls under the umbrella of embracing the love of change, so I don't know what really separates it from any of the other qualities.
Oh, the embracing of the love changes the starting of what he says in here, so that's what everything does tend to fall under.
Right, so that doesn't help me understand what
But no.
grotesque is, that is separate from these other categories, and that is not a negative attribute.
The grotesque, I mean, it's similar to what he says with the savageness of, to be savage tends to be called a negative.
Right.
If someone calls you savage, you'd assume they're being mean to you. But if you look deeper into it, you'll realize that that's not actually a negative quality, because it's just different than what you know for the savageness.
Okay, so both
But-
grotesque and savage are not negative qualities.
But to be
what does it
grotesque
mean?
is to, and to seem ugly, to seem horrid to someone else.
Okay.
Someone might look at you and think, I'd be very mean. Someone might look at something and call it grotesque.
Whoa.
I know.
This is why we use one in oneself and not. Someone might look at someone and find them grotesque.
No, but, yeah, I don't know. Let them finish this.
Okay.
Someone might look at someone and find them grotesque, but within themselves, they will be able to embrace that and find that grotesqueness is what makes them uniquely themselves.
Is grotesque just another word for sometimes viewed as ugly?
Yes.
How? Would you like to suggest a page now?
Bottom of 49, he
49.
gives a pretty good definition, I'm sure you have it underlined, Mr. Burki.
Page off.
He says, we'll all admit this about the Gothic, so he only gives one paragraph to the grotesque, because he thinks maybe this is the most obvious part. At the very bottom of the page, what does he say?
I thought you were reading. It sounded
Sure.
like you were going into the reading.
No, no.
What does he say there? at the
It threw me
bottom?
through a little.
The tendency, see that?
I shall defer the endeavor to define the most curious and subtle character until we have occasion to examine one of the divisions of the Renaissance schools, which is morbidly influenced by it. It is the less necessary to insist upon here, because every reader familiar with Gothic architecture must understand what I mean, and will, I believe, have no hesitation in admitting that the tendency to delight in fantastic and ludicrous, as well as in sublime images, is a universal instinct of the Gothic imagination.
So it doesn't say ugly, what does
Not
it say?
ugly, ludicrous.
Fantastic.
and
Fantastic.
ludicrous.
So gargoyles, or even what we might call a grotesque on a building.
Yeah.
Fanciful, it seems silly, it seems playful, it seems
Fantastic.
sometimes representative of a demon or something like that, but sometimes just, it'd be fun to throw an elephant here, let's put an elephant on the building. Right, that sort of.
Why is it not forced change? This is what I was asking, by the way, I was getting to one.
Why is it not forced?
Yeah, why is the grotesque not forced to change if it is fantastic and ludicrous?
To delight in what you find around yourself to be ludicrous and fantastic? Or are you saying
I haven't
specifically
seen
in the
I
architecture?
haven't seen a gargoyle in real life recently, so. It seems like it's something outside the realm of what we encounter, to the degree that it is fantastic, right? So, yeah, so for that reason, why does the grotesque not fall under the category of forced change if it is beyond what is found in nature?
If it's beyond what is the regular?
Mhm.
Well, if it's beyond what is the regular, then it is in itself change, so it'd be embracing that, but you're not
Yes.
forcing it.
It doesn't occur in nature.
So you can see fantastical things in nature. Things that are unexplainable, that you might not be able to explain, would be considered fantastic. Things which are, a fantasy because it's unexplainable, but you'd embrace that. It reminds me of the definition of the realists in Brothers K, where if a realist believes in God, he'll believe in miracles, because it's already set forth for him by the fact that God exists. So if you know that something has to happen, if something happens, you know it does, something that you can't explain, you know there's a reason for that, and you're gonna accept that that is a thing that happens in life. Right? See if I can rephrase that ever so slightly better. If there's something, not necessarily that you don't believe in, but something that you are unable to explain, that would be ludicrous, that would be fantastic, that would be the grotesque. you need to accept that maybe I don't fully understand why this happens. Maybe there's something outside of what I'm allowed to know, and that's why this happens. But you're not going to try and make that happen again because it'd be out of your scope, and you're not going to say that it didn't happen just because you didn't believe in it. You're going to accept that and move on.
Which is an event or like a place? Is it, like, are you talking about maybe seeing the Grand Canyon and that being a kind of fantastical experience, or is it an encounter with something or someone?
It'd be more of an event that you have to accept, because you can explain why the Grand Canyon exists. It'd be amazing, but that would fall under the naturalism, less of the grotesque.
Maybe one way to approach this, it's not the exact same as Mr. Power, but help reset us with the proper level of change as opposed to the excess and deficiency. Because we are trying to hit a mean of change.
Proper level of change is accepting change as it comes to you. The right level of change is accepting change as it comes to you and as it happens around you. The forced level of change, disease level of change, is to try and make that change happen in others, in yourself, in the world around you.
I think we've made the jump from architecture now to application to life. Let's stay in architecture.
Let's
briefly.
stay in architecture.
Briefly,
I'm sorry. I thought
so
you
we've got the monotony. You said would be like the classical Greeks or Egyptians, just
Yeah.
making bricks with the exact same mechanicities. So that would be a deficient level of change.
Mhm.
And then we have the right level of change, which is Gothic architecture, and then there's a diseased level of change. What is meant by diseased level of change? And if we could stay in the realm of architecture briefly.
It would be similar to the window metaphor I mentioned earlier, where just placing windows there and there and there purely because, for no real reason, purely because you think a window might be there, it doesn't serve any purpose other than being there. That'd be what he says in architecture. It would be adding things to art, not because it helps the art itself, but because you just felt like adding it.
And what happens if we just stick with columns? If the Gothic allows for more variation in its columns than the classical orders, what would a diseased love of change look like with columns themselves?
The disease love would get rid of what has come before it. I believe this is in the redundance bit. It would get rid of what came before it and replace the columns as a whole with something completely new.
So no columns at all.
No columns, or if it went from columns being a circular pillar, maybe suddenly, instead of this thing that's worked for many years and trying to adjust it and change it a bit to work with what I'm doing, I'm going to replace my columns with pyramids that I want to use to support it. It's getting rid of what works and replacing it with something completely different.
And so now, do we have any sense of patterns and progressions and rhythms at all?
In disease love?
Right.
No. It would be taking those patterns and trying to break them purely for the sake of breaking them, not to try and make them better.
And if your whole goal every time you make something is to break a pattern, what do you end up with?
Monotony.
A new form of monotony. Isn't that interesting? You start with monotony, everything looks the same, and you end with monotony, every single thing looks different. Yeah, fascinating.
You said on page 5 that one needs to have one's own life to express, not the same life as all who live monotonously perfect. I wanted to ask, is virtue boring? Like, is the perfectly virtuous person just a boring person and it's not interesting?
If one has no errors, no mistakes, what makes one's life interesting? It's those little bits where you mess up or something comical happens that makes it interesting. If the virtuous person doesn't make any mistake in their life, what would be the point of that life? It wouldn't be a life to begin with. It would just be, it would just be pure virtue, pure do-goodiness, and not actually your life.
Gotta spice it up with vice somehow.
Not necessarily with vice. You don't have to commit an evil, but you don't necessarily have to always be at the peak state of good. If you were to dwindle, if I never got upset at anybody in my entire life, that that'd be impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that'd be,
But if we want to up the stakes a bit here, perhaps we could apply this to the New Testament readings this year.
Yeah, I mean, is heaven boring? I thought of the end of Dante too,
Oh.
of them singing the praises.
Well, honestly.
Is that, I don't know, it might be boring.
Well, I was going to go for, is Christ boring in the New Testament?
no,
Why not?
because he is made man. He suffers. He suffers because of the sin, not because of his sins, but because of everyone else's sins. And also, the most interesting bit, and the part that's sticking out to me right now, is when he goes up to the, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what fruit it is. When he goes up to the tree, he says, give me a fruit. It doesn't give him a fruit, and he kills that tree. I don't want to say he's not perfect, but
Flips tables, he gets angry.
but he definitely isn't living it to the peak of virtue at all times, especially when he takes on everyone's sins and goes and dies for that.
Okay.
So for this embracing change, is there no, we're just supposed to, there's a kind of right way to react to the change that happens in our lives? Am I, or is it that we have to do we have to change things about ourselves throughout the things around us? Or do we react a certain way to the changes that set?
It's not, you don't have to react in a certain way, you have to just react. You can't reject the change that happens, or else you're not embracing that love of change.
Isn't rejecting, reacting,
Oh,
and
yeah.
embracing, is that reacting?
If you rejected the change around you, I guess that would be a reaction, but it wouldn't be a reaction to the change necessarily. It wouldn't be something happens because of change. It would be pretending that change doesn't exist and going about it as if things were the way they were before that.
Can you draw on your self-portraits here for this? I think that's what you do in your paper, so the first to the last one.
When Van Gogh first arrives in Harlem, we see it's the one on the far end for me. It's the one in the middle for most of the people in the audience.
Well, the far left.
Far left.
I think we can tell which is the younger version.
That's a valid point. We see him almost have the halo radiating around him. I don't know if it came out that well in the print. Maybe they can see it better in their papers. He has the halo radiating around him. He has his vest open, ready to embrace the world, embrace what happens. And then that's the painter who we see paint these three paintings. That's the Van Gogh who we see go and make the paint on the change that happens around him until the end of his time in Arles. This is almost the last painting he paints there, where we see him now closed off to the world. He's even wearing a hat, his ear's bandaged because he cut his ear, but he's more inner. He's not accepting that change. He doesn't want stuff to happen. He's refusing to embrace the world around him.
He's refusing to embrace the world.
Mm-hmm.
You, in your paper, highlight this as a positive acknowledgement of change, I believe.
He acknowledges change within him, but it is a disease love of change, not disease. It is a bad lack love of change because he does not embrace the change around him anymore.
And yet, we're also seeing him with his ear bandaged, which means he had a disease love of change insofar as he forced the change too.
Yes, and we see this even with the history of when this was made, is he is kind of forcefully admitted into the hospital in Arles by the people there because the people all loved him, and he doesn't like it there. He tries to leave, and as soon as he's able to leave, he leaves Arles and no longer embraces the people there.
At a fundamental level, it seems like an artist is telling the truth. And you seem to celebrate about Van Gogh that he tells the truth about himself.
Mm-hmm. Even if the truth is bad. Even if this truth is negative, where he's saying, I am no longer as open and embracing the world as I once was. I am now closed off. That is still embracing himself and the change that he has gone through.
It's impossible for people not to change.
No. Everyone changes. impossible not to change because imperfection is crucial to one's life. And the only thing that won't change is perfection. Because once you reach perfection, any change to that ruins perfection. You can't be more perfect.
Okay, so he does change because he's a person. It's a very profound change that we can witness here. But he's at least looking at it and acknowledging it and telling us something. You talk about contesting the halo, and well, you didn't say it just now, but the background on the left is a halo. What about on the right? What do you find the significance there?
Cutting him in half almost with the red. It's all, I mean, it's dark red, cutting right at the ear. From below the ear, it's all red. Talking about himself being split between not being split between wanting to embrace the world, being split between embracing himself and not wanting to embrace the world. Where the body down is not embracing the world, but he himself is embracing himself and the change he's gone through.
Okay. Why are you embracing? Why would you say he's embracing it?
Because he makes the painting.
He makes the painting. Okay, I suppose there's a level.
If he did not want to accept who he was and embrace the change he went through, he would not make a painting of himself.
But the painting he makes of himself has a very clear division between what's above here and what's below here. Maybe saying my mind is not at peace with my body, or even just say my mind is cut in half.
Saying it's the mind the mind being his inner self is what I saw.
Right.
Where on the above, with the mind, that's what he's embracing in the painting. Everything below is what he is blocking off from the rest of the world.
And what goes from the bottom part to the top part?
The smoke.
Smoke. So haziness of his condition of blindness. Okay. What about these three middle paintings? What about a good life are you seeing there?
I'm seeing him embrace the love of change,
Embrace
obviously,
change.
that's what they all do. But each of these are from specific parts in Arnold, parts that we went to. I have a picture of me in a coffin at the Roman cemetery.
Good
But-
times, all right.
We see
Embracing the
specifically,
law of change.
well, I think I brought this up earlier with Lake Sally Ponte, it's one of three works, titled the same thing, all completely different paintings, where he's showing it at different times, what is happening, different viewpoints even, where he's embracing the change that happens just in this one place, just the change that happens in the nature of this one place. We see with the spectators in the arena, where the thing that happens every week or whenever people are in the arena is the bullfight. And so we see the bullfight kind of, I describe it as a cave painting. That's not the focus of it. You can barely see the bullfight in the painting. What you do see is you see the people talking to each other. And the less the people seem to be talking to each other, the more blurred and less detailed they get as you go on. And then with entrance to the public garden, you see him focus once more on the people, where he shows as vague as possible, because they're all black silhouettes, people at the garden. Not specific people, but the people who go there every day. And because they're all blacked out and in silhouette form, that's him showing that it's different people every time. It's no one specific person, except for what I believe to be himself there in the foreground. It's in the outfit we see himself depicted in most famously. It's the hat that we know Van Gogh for wearing. I saw that as him holding his painting of the public gardens.
It really looks like a newspaper or something.
Or newspaper, but I saw it as him seeing the change from his painting to what he's seeing there.
I know we're getting close to the end, but I do want to ask one more about that, because in your paper, you say it's the people, and as you just talked about, it's the people that show the change, specific people. But you specifically say it's not the nature, and I wonder why. A garden would also change from day to day and season to season, which seems to be a good rhythmic change. That's not the same every day, so it's not monotonous, and there's a naturalism in the Gothic. Why in this entrance to the public garden, even in the title, it's the public garden, do you say it's not about the nature, it's about the people?
I think we've had this discussion
Probably
every
we have.
time we brought this
Yeah.
painting up, because I like saying it's the people, you like saying it's a garden, and I don't disagree. I just don't think the garden's the forefront of the nature. If the garden was the forefront of what he wanted to be depicting, I wouldn't see a point in depicting the people the way he has depicted them, or including himself there. Another reason why it's himself is the lack of shadow he has. Everything else is casting a shadow. That character is not, because he wouldn't be able to see that shadow if it is himself. So I believe that's him showing the people that change through the garden, because if the garden is always going to stay the same, it's always going to be this entrance to this place people go. The thing that will change about that isn't the place, it's the people going through it.
Certainly the people change more frequently than the natural aspect of it. I'm rather tempted to ask a question about your jacket at this point.
One of the other works.
Or does Starry Night in some way embrace this level of change? Or is this actually an exception to the rule?
The Starry Night in Arl is, it's not an exception to the rule, and we see that in the way he kind of fantastically depicts the stars. They're not depicted out, one would see the stars, they're depicted as the way the stars would be moving. As the night sky changes throughout the year, the stars kind of swirl and move through the sky, and that's how we see them depicted here. And the lights reflected on the water aren't going to be the same lights as the night before, because it's not going to be the same sky as the night before.
And
So-
the water?
Hmm?
And the water itself?
The water's not going to be the same water. It's going to move through. It's going to flow through.
And also from.
It might refresh itself as the same water, but the water that's there now isn't going to be the water that's there.
And you can and cannot step in the same
That's
river
right.
twice. All right, well, this is the only time to step in this river, I suppose, in this particular arena. So, family and family friends first, of course, front row first. Any questions you have for Mr. Burki?
Mr. Ricky?
Mr. Powell asked if there's like a perfectly virtuous person, are they interesting? And you said no. But is it not interesting because that is a change in one's life to meet a man who's perfectly virtuous?
Would be interesting to the people who meet them, but he would not be interesting in and of himself, because he would just be the same thing that happens every time.
Okay.
He would be a monotonous soul. They would be a monotonous soul. Ms. Rowland?
This one comes from Ms. Snyderford. Are there any changes that should not be embraced?
No. No changes should not be embraced. If change is happening, it's happening for a reason, and you can't stop that. So you should embrace it as it comes. Even if you don't like that change, I don't know, me getting diabetes, I don't like that. I'm still going to embrace that, as that is now a part of me.
I wonder if replace the word imperfection with original sin, would it have the same meaning to you? That man is imperfect.
No.
Say more.
I don't think you would, because that would be ignoring the change in the world. If you replace the word with the imperfection with original sin, that would be saying there's sin in not only man, but sin in everything. And I don't think the change that you see in your day-to-day would be necessarily sinful. And I think even you can change for the better. If I would not say that because man has original sin, they can change for the better. Say because they are imperfect, they are able to change for the better and change for the worse.
Well, you say to live a good life, one must embrace imperfection. Well, original sin states that we're imperfect. Did Ruskin have a different view of
Would he say you have to embrace original sin?
imperfection?
It's a change.
It's something that is part of you, and you can embrace it, and specifically you do embrace it when you rid yourself of it. Like, that would be embracing it. You'd be accepting that it is something that is there, and you'd be using it to help make change by getting rid of it.
So there's a kind of reaction to change that is not rejecting change, but it also seems not to be embracing the change if you're trying to improve from that change.
You'd have to embrace it and accept that it is there to improve from it. If you have not embraced the change, you can't improve from the change. If you have done nothing but reject it and said that it doesn't happen, how can you grow from that?
Are you saying more that you accept that there is change? You don't have to agree with the change
Yeah.
itself, but you have to accept that change will happen.
You can dislike what happens, you can dislike the change, but if you just reject it and say that doesn't happen, that it didn't exist, you're never going to be able to improve from that point. You have to embrace that this did happen, and I'm going to try and better myself to fix it, or to grow from this.
So you said there's disease change. Is that forced change? Forced change?
The disease level change is the trying to force change to happen.
Okay, so then what's the difference between that and working toward a good and you're trying to become better, like working to change? Like, would it be bad to want to improve yourself?
No, it would not be bad to want to better yourself, but that would also not be forcing it. You wouldn't be trying to make it happen even if it wasn't something that was capable or feasible. If I'm trying to better myself, I'm going to accept what comes to me and use that change to try and make myself a better person, not try and make something happen, that way I am a better person.
I think if you finish the definition of your disease love of change, as you explained it to me yesterday, it's not just forcing change, it's forcing change just for the sake of change, not forcing change to improve something, right?
So you said that someone who's a tool is someone who doesn't think for themselves and just does? Is that what you're saying? So if I really like Legos and I build Lego sets, follow the instructions, and I'm not thinking about it, does that make me a tool?
Yeah.
So is it okay to be a tool? Because I thought, it sounded like it was something negative, but is it okay to have some tool aspects of your life where you're just part of the system?
I mean, that's what I believe I said this earlier, where everyone, because we're not in that ideal world, everyone's gonna have some tool aspects, and even in that ideal world, you're gonna be doing things. If I love making candles, I know how to make a good candle, I'm gonna follow those candle making, become slightly a tool, but I'm going to enjoy it, and each candle's gonna be made the way I wanted it to be made.
So you can be a tool and still be perfect in an ideal setting?
No, you can't be perfect, even in the ideal setting. If you were in the ideal setting, you would be, and perfect, you'd be a tool. If you're perfect, you're a tool because you're monotonous and not thinking for yourself. You're just doing what you're told is good and what is perfect.
Good news is at least you chose the Lego set yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna add on to the Lego thing of how many times in our house, Legos have been start to be built, and then we realized we did a wrong section first, and had to go back and have that piece to take them all off and start again. So even though we were a tool in putting it together, we many times have done that wrong and had to go back and do it over.
10 to 1, the first time a man touches their work, they will make a mistake.
Yeah, that's good.
That's great. That's, if you were perfect every time, it would no longer be man.
The good news, it's not gonna happen, so. Okay, even though this is not a complete discussion, and I'm sure there's more to be had, and you will ask more questions when you leave, still, we're going to have to call the end of this discussion and maybe just not seek for perfection. I will gladly steal Mr. Nediger's packets for today's.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually mine, I'm gonna go back to those.
Okay.
I got you. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Thanks for doing this on schedule.
I do really like that. It's really kind of